Hello guys, this is Sullla once again. We're going to be looking through the newest patch. This is patch 3.6. It's been out for a couple days right now, and that's kind of a good thing, I think. I've had a chance to look at a few of the changes, not all of them, but been able to see some of the things in game. This is the Lissandra patch. The note said that she would be released at a later date, but she was actually released like mere hours after the patch was posted. So we'll go ahead and look at Lissandra. Her stats are not listed here in actual patch notes, so I will go ahead and pull them up on the League of Legends wiki. So Lissandra so far seems to be a pretty strong champion. I'm not sure I would go so far as to say that she's all that overpowered. She may be. It's just she hasn't been out that long. But she does seem to be a strong choice. I have seen Lissandra bans popping up in high elo ranked play. Lissandra has a kit that is, how can I put this? Has a high skill cap. Is a champion that can be really, really strong if she gets ahead. She can play really aggressively in lane. At the same time, she does have to put herself in a lot of danger in order to play herself effectively. Let me go through and explain what I mean by that. We'll look at her skills. A passive is every so often she can cost an ability for no mana. So very similar to Nunu's passive. Riot getting a little bit lazy with the item stuff here. Okay, so her Q, Ice Shard, on a very short cooldown, 6 seconds to start, goes down to only 4 seconds with more points in the skill. So with max CDR, that's a little over 2 seconds at rank 5. 85 mana cost. Magic damage is actually quite low. Note that with 5 points in the skill, only deals 215 damage. It's actually quite low. And the AP ratio is just average, not that great, 0.65 ratio. However, the skill itself is quite good. It is a skill shot, throws a spear of ice in a line, straight line skill shot. The really nice thing about this skill is it goes through minions. Those who don't, yeah, where is it? Right here. Shards will pass through the target and deal the same damage to other enemies hit. It also slows on contact if you're able to hit an enemy with it. So you can't dodge this by standing behind minions, and that is actually very powerful indeed. If you think of other skills like that, if you think of why Graves' buckshot was so strong, release version Graves that could just shoot you through minions was really ridiculous and things like that. But so a skill shot that is on a short cooldown and can go through minions and slows if you hit them on first contact. The slow is pretty not that good. I mean, like a 20% slow is not really that significant, but still, spammable skill. The damage is low, but goes through minions and is difficult to dodge for that reason. So this is a pretty good skill. It's just the actual damage is low, is the thing. W here, this is not a skill shot. The active is freezes an area around Lissandra, roots enemies to the deals magic damage, roots enemies to the ground. Once again, the raw damage is a bit low, only 230. AP ratio is just average, not that great at 0.6, but doesn't have to be aimed. Roots enemies to the ground around here. Starts at 1.1 second, goes up to 1.5. So the skill order is pretty obvious. Q first, W second, 1 point in E, and skill her ult when it's available. So this is pretty nice. Again, the cooldown is high at first, but goes down to a much more reasonable level with more points in the skill. So you've got, again, the ability to slow. You have a root on her. And then her E is pretty ridiculous. Casts a Claw of Ice. The damage is pretty negligible. This is a 1-point skill. But here's the key thing. Reactivating the ability transports Lissandra to the Claw's current location. And the range is a lot. 1050, that's about double the range of a Flash. I believe Flash is about 500 range. So she can play really aggressively up in front of the enemy team's tower. And if somebody comes to gank her, you just toss out your E and you blink backwards. And if they come up close to you, you root them to the ground. So she has great escapability, really, really good escapability. It is very tough to catch Lissandra. So she can play very aggressively, is the thing. She can be up in front of somebody, like I said, and then he just tosses out her E, and she gets right out of danger. So this is what makes her very strong indeed. Again, now it is on a long cooldown, 24 seconds, and you're going to have 1 point in this skill, so that is going to be a long cooldown. But it sets up all kinds of interesting plays. Escape, you can dive under a tower to kill somebody, and then you can use this to get out, you can use this to initiate. It is a really strong skill. And that is probably the biggest reason why people are playing Lissandra, is for this skill right here. Her ult, also very nice. 2 uses. You can use it to lock up one enemy champ, freezes target champion, deals magic damage, stuns for 1.5, so you can lock up one enemy target. Or self-cast, in case you're self in Dark Ice, you become untargetable and invulnerable, but unable to take any action for 1.5 seconds. And then it deals area of effect damage around her. Creates ice, lasts for 3 seconds, slows enemy movement speed. You will probably see it used this way a little bit more often in area of effect team composition. So damage, again, is pretty respectable. 0.7 AP ratio, again, is not fantastic, just solid. But all in all, put it together, she's got a very nice kit. It's a kit, as I said, high skill cap. Her Q is her main damage source. That is a skill shot. Using her E effectively. Also, this is also a skill shot. You have to know when to use this to blink in and out, when to use enemy cast on her ult, when to self-cast. Again, like I said, high skill cap, but I think she's a pretty strong champion overall. Imagine being able to dash at twice the range of a flash in any direction pretty much anytime you want. And, well, mobility tends to kill in this game. Mobility is really, really strong. You can also think of it as being like somebody who has a skill similar to Kassadin's, but doesn't have Kassadin's horrible, horrible pre-6 laning phase. So, her raw damage is low. She does have to be fairly close to the enemy team to do her damage. Like, this is not that, this is only 725 range. So she does have to be pretty close to enemy teams, but we'll see. Some people have been playing around with very tanky builds for Lissandra, and that might be a way to get around some of this. But early word is she is pretty good as a champion. Okay. Go ahead and minimize that. Okay, so also in this patch, I said this is a big patch. There was a rework to Sejuani and a rework to Trundle. Trundle's rework, not that significant. He largely stayed the same. Sejuani's a little bit more significant. Now, for whatever reason, they don't have the numbers for Sejuani here. So I will go ahead and pull her up on the League of Legends wiki, and we'll just go ahead and look at Sejuani's numbers. They do have the Trundle numbers, so maybe someone on Riot was just a little bit lazy there. Sejuani, I mean, her overall play style is not that different. She's just much stronger as a champion. So she has a new passive, Frost Armor. When she damages an enemy, she gets bonus armor. So it starts at 10, and then you get more as the game goes on with more levels. And movement slow reduction reduces movement slowing effects. Not too significant, but 10%, 15%, not bad, not bad. So this is kind of nice. Bonus armor, 10 bonus armor at the start of the game is quite significant. That will help you jungle. Sejuani is a jungler. I've seen Scarra play her mid occasionally, but she's, let's face it, she's a jungler. Her Q hasn't really changed very much. Her Q is a 1-point skill, 1 point in Arctic Assault. This is your mobility skill. You move around the map doing this. You can go through walls. Very nice skill, range 650. High mana cost, so be careful. Don't spam this too much early in the game. 80 mana is a lot early on. By the way, the cooldown is pretty nice. They've reduced this in patches. The cooldown used to be like 20 seconds, but now it's 15. All right, more significant, her kind of main skills are her W, E, and R. Her W deals area of effect damage around her. Next basic attack deals magic damage. This they changed. It used to just deal area of effect magic damage. It was very similar to Shyvana's area of effect magic damage skill. I believe that's Shyvana's W. Used to be almost identical. Now you will deal bonus damage on your next basic attack when you activate this. And then Sejuani will swing her flail and deal magic damage to enemies nearby. So here's the bonus magic damage. It's actually pretty low on the initial hit, so 40 at rank 1 up to 120. And then you deal magic damage to enemies surrounding you, and this scales off of bonus health. Again, it doesn't scale off health, it scales off bonus health, so be careful of that. That's extra health that you build. This is a reason why Sunfire Cape is such a good item on Sejuani. It gives her extra health, so will scale with her W. It also will give her armor, so she's tankier, so she can jungle better. And Sunfire will be sitting there ticking with magic damage per second, and it synergizes really well with the magic damage per second on her W. Note, though, that the range is very low, only 350. Very, very low. The trade-off is the mana cost is very reasonable, only 40 mana. Very, very reasonable. And nicely, the cooldown does go down with more points in the skill. I believe that you max this first on Sejuani when jungling, largely because the cooldown goes down, so you can spam it more often, is my understanding. Even though the raw damage is a little low, you want to have this up as much as possible to clear. Sejuani doesn't clear that fast in the jungle. She's not great at actually jungling, but her skills make up for it. Okay, so Permafrost, they've reworked this a little bit. This used to be her passive, is my understanding that her basic attacks would apply Frost, was her old passive. Now that passive has just been folded into E. Once you put a point in E, her attacks and basic abilities apply Frost. So that is, if you use your basic attack, your auto attack, or you hit someone with Q or W, that applies Frost to enemies. And there's a really neat graphical effect on this. Now you can see the Frost on enemies, so that's pretty cool. And you can then activate Permafrost, or E, which causes enemies that have the Frost little debuff on them to take magic damage and be slowed. The damage is pretty good. It starts out low, but it goes up quickly with more points in the skill. Does have a decent AP ratio. You can actually build AP on Sejuani, although I don't generally recommend it, but her AP ratios are not bad at all. What's more significant is the slow. This skill has an amazing slow. It starts at 50 and it goes up to 70%, and the duration is excellent too. Starts at 2 seconds up to 3. So you get this skill maxed early. I believe that you max this second on Sejuani because you need to clear. Well, I mean, if you really want to go gank heavy, you can max this first. But the basic idea is, you know, you charge in with your Q. Ideally, you charge in, hit them with Q. That applies Frost. You then pop W and get that bonus magic damage on the next attack. Then you go in and you pop permafrost so they can't get away. That slows them down to a crawl, 70% slow for 3 seconds once it's maxed. It's really tough to get away from that. So this is a nice skill, very nice. And then her ult is not really changed. It's a skill shot. She tosses out her bola. By the way, the bola is that thing you wind up and then throw. Tosses it out in a straight line skill shot. If it hits an enemy champ, shatters, stuns them for a decent period of time. And yeah, so you can see the damage is decent, not all that great. Does have a good AP ratio, but you're probably not building that much AP. The real advantage, though, is the stun. Starts at 1.5 seconds up to 2 seconds at max rank. And yes, if it hits more than one target gets stunned. Basically, I've heard this, the best way to describe this is it's like a ranged Amumu ultimate. And you can actually hit people a long distance away. If you use Q to charge in and then toss your R, you can actually get real close to people. In fact, you can even make this crazier. You can flash and then Q and then R, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of their team and you've just stunned everybody on the team. Again, the trade-off is it is a skill shot. You do have to aim this, and you can miss. And believe me, I have missed on this skill shot. But it's really, really strong if you hit it. And Sejuani is a great component of an area of effect team comp. So she's actually quite strong right now. Overall, she's actually quite a strong champion. And I expect that we'll see people playing her. The only reason why people didn't play her in the past is her kit is very similar to Amumu's, and Amumu was just better, so there was no reason to play Sejuani. But Amumu has been nerfed many times. He is much weaker now, so people are going to play Sejuani. And she's also new, so people always like to play around with new champs. Okay, anyway, so Sejuani, pretty strong, a strong jungler. Trundle also buffed a bit in this patch. This is a rework. Now, Trundle generally stayed very similar in terms of how he played. The biggest thing is they made his model look different. He no longer looks like the troll covered in filth and garbage or whatever. He now has like an ice theme instead. So let's look at what they did. Passive exactly the same. It used to be called Decompose. Now it's King's Tribute. So whatever. More of a lore change than anything else. Basically the same. Previously Rabid Bite, now it's called Chomp. This skill is very similar. It has not really changed much at all. If you note, the damage is a little bit lower at, it's just a little bit lower overall. What they did though is they increased the scaling a little bit. So it's, let's see, what is it? Now the base damage is 20 instead of 30, but it's 0.1, it's, what is it, 0.1 attack damage. You get plus, it scales 1-to-1 with attack damage rather than 0.8 to attack damage. And then at max rank, it is almost identical. It's 100 instead of 90, and it's 1.2 attack damage. So it's very, very similar. They did add this, now slows target by 75%, but for 1/10 of a second. Okay, great. That doesn't really affect that much. So this skill is very similar to the way it was before. The biggest change is to this, well, this and the ultimate, Trundle's W. Previously Contaminate, they have increased the attack speed bonus at max rank from 60% to 80%, so there's a nice little buff. The difference is it used to grant Tenacity, it no longer does that. Now it grants increased healing to Trundle, and this scales with his passive. Where is it? His Decompose / King's Tribute. Basically, when anything dies near Trundle, he gets health back. So this, his W now scales with his passive. In other words, you can think of this as being like a little mini version of Hecarim's W, where he self-heals. So it's similar to that. Doesn't really change the skilling order for Trundle, though. Q first, W second, 1 point in his E. Pillar of Filth is now Pillar of Ice. It's a new graphical effect. Almost exactly the same. The difference is it now interrupts channels, and that's actually kind of a nice buff. So if you see Karthus tossing out his ult, or you see Shen trying to teleport, boom, just toss out your pillar, and it will block their channel. Will block channeled skills. So that's nice, I guess. You can use it against Katarina and so on, but this is almost identical. And the ultimate has been changed. This is where the other big changes. I mentioned that his W got changed. His ult is also different now. Now, instead of dealing a flat amount of damage, it deals a % of max health instead on his ultimate. Now deals 24% of max health instead of a flat amount. So often useful to, as in the past, it's often useful to ult tanky champions because Trundle's ultimate drains their armor and magic resist. They've adjusted this a flat 20% instead of scaling. That doesn't really change that much. It's pretty similar. Second drain effect now applies over 4 seconds, and it keeps the stats longer. You keep the stats for another 4 seconds, so he keeps the stats longer. Overall, I'd say this is a buff to his ult. It's pretty nice in terms of how this scales. Off of max health. So generally speaking, you often want to ult tanky champions to take away their stats, their armor and MR, and give them the Trundle in team fights. And this ult now makes it better to use that. Of course, you can still go after the squishy targets, the AD carries, the APs, but works quite well on those tanky champions as well. So overall, this doesn't really change Trundle that much. I'd say it's a slight buff, but it doesn't really change his kit that much. The biggest problem with Trundle was not his kit. His kit was always pretty solid. The problem was people didn't like the look of Trundle, the aesthetics of the champion design, if I can be more formal. People just did not like playing as this filthy champion, like covered with garbage and rotting filth. People just didn't like that. So Trundle's one of the least played champions in League of Legends. Now that they've reworked him to make him more noble and he has like the ice particles now, you'll see him a lot more often. Just because people, as I said, people didn't like the way he looked. And, that really does factor into who gets played in this game. If you don't think that that's true, why are there so many Misfortune and Lux and Sona players? It's not a coincidence. People like playing as certain champions, and people did not like the way that Trundle looked. By the way, other least popular champions in the game, Urgot has long been one of the least popular champs. It's pretty obvious why that is. He's a hideous monster, and people just don't like the aesthetics of that. So we will see more Trundle, we will see more Sejuani, and we'll probably see a lot of Lissandra. It's a lot in this patch. I'm a little surprised there's so much in this patch. We haven't even gotten into all the other changes, and that's already been like 20 to 25 minutes. So we'll be able to go through the rest of the changes a little faster. There's a lot of little tweaks and bug fixes. Brand bug fix with his ult, great. Bug fix on Corki's Missile Barrage, very nice. Nice to see. Not much to say there. Mundo, they have changed it so he cannot kill himself by using infected cleaver. Will not reduce health below 1. Same thing for Masochism. Okay, basic stuff. You can't kill yourself by using your own skills. They won't reduce your health below 1. Makes sense. Draven, they are still messing around with his spinning axes. They had hoped that they tried to change this in the last patch. Unfortunately, these changes were very disruptive, didn't offer enough potential for skilled players to showcase their skills, so they've reverted this change, restored it back to the prior functionality, and the axes won't drop on the other side of impassable terrain. They've been messing around with this for a while, trying to make it easier to catch the axes. They didn't like the change. A lot of Draven players complained, so it's been restored back. Okay, not much to say there. Ezreal, bugs with Pulsefire Ezreal, where he wouldn't see gold pop-ups, would see his death animation a second time. Okay, great. Bug fixes. Fiddlesticks fixed another bug where he wouldn't auto-attack his target after channeling his drain life. Okay, minor stuff there. Karma getting more buffs. So Riot, I will say this at the beginning. Be very careful here. If you keep buffing Karma, she will soon be overpowered. Karma, after the rework, still not played very much. People still did not like Karma. They are trying to make her stronger, and, well, we'll see. She's definitely stronger here. Her Q, her Inner Flame, damage increased at low levels from 60 at rank 1 up to 80. So increase the damage. It's still the same at max rank, still 260, but that will help her early game. W, Focused Resolve, cooldown reduced. Now the scaling goes down. It is now 12 seconds at max rank instead of 14. That's a nice little buff overall. By the way, the skill order for Karma is still pretty much the same. Q first, W second, 1 point in E. It's very obvious that you're supposed to put 1 point in her E skill, Inspire. That's they've reduced the cooldown yet again, down to just 10 seconds. And the movement speed bonus is now 40% at rank 1, as opposed to 20%. So this is very obviously the 1 point skill, because you really don't get very much from putting more points in this skill. You can already get a 40% movement speed boost just from 1 point in the skill. Again, this also shifts Karma. She really is an AP mid champion. She is not a great support. Her kit has heavily been shifted towards AP mid and not support. Then this is the biggest buff of all to Karma. Mantra, cooldown reduced. 45 at level 1, 42 at level 6, 39 at level 11, 36 at level 16. That is a major, major buff to Karma, because she is heavily dependent on Mantra and those Mantra charges. So reducing it to 36 seconds with 40% cooldown reduction, that cuts it down to about, what is that? Cuts it down to about 20 seconds. Yeah, should be right around 20 seconds. And that's a big increase, because that cuts a lot off of where it was before. So it's been the value's been cut what by like 20%. Yeah, it's about 20%. We'll be up about 20% faster than before. So that's a big buff. Again, be careful with this Riot because this is probably okay here, but if she gets another buff, she's going to be stupidly overpowered because if Karma gets too strong, then her W is going to make her impossible to kill. Her W with Mantra on it allows her to self-heal in fights as long as that tether is not broken. If she gets buffed too strong, she's going to be unkillable in mid. And they better be awful careful of this. But Karma, these are very serious, very sizable buffs to Karma. We'll see if it makes her viable. She was still not played much after the rework, but we shall see. Lulu, nerf in this patch. Yes, she gets more mana per level. That's nice, but the real nerf, mana cost increased on Glitter Lance at low rank. So from 40 up to 60. That's a big nerf at level 1 because you don't have that much mana at level 1 and the skill's now 50% more expensive. Yes, it goes back to the same at rank 5, at level 9. This is not as bad as it could be because Lulu's players typically max their Q first. They typically max Glitter Lance before other skills, so you would hit that 80 mana anyway at level 9. So it's not as bad as it could be, but this is still a fairly sizable nerf to Lulu. And it will make it significantly more difficult to spam her skill at level 1. So it'll be tougher to establish that lane dominance early on, which is crucial with support. So this is a pretty big nerf to Lulu. Which is strange because the most played supports right now are Sona and Thresh, and Sona was not touched. Thank God. But Sona will be even more overpowered compared to other supports, and they will probably hit her in the next patch, would be my expectation. Alright, Malzahar, nobody really plays Malzahar. He's among the least popular and weakest AP mids. They've reduced his mana cost on Call of the Void and the mana cost on Null Zone, so scaling mana costs much more reasonable. For those who don't know, when League of Legends first came out, the cooldowns on most AP caster skills were longer and the mana costs were higher. So this is bringing Malzahar more in line with current champion design. Remember, League of Legends did start from sort of that Defense of the Ancients Dota base, and in Dota, most of the casting skills have much longer cooldowns and cost much more mana. And League has evolved to a system where the cooldowns tend to be shorter and they cost less mana. But the trade-off is the skills are weaker than they are in Dota. And some people like that and some people don't. But in any case, Malzahar, this is, he's sort of an older champion at this point, and they're bringing the mana cost more in line with current champion design. They did the same thing for Morgana in recent patches. Nasus, one of the most played junglers, widely hated in the competitive scene because his 95% attack speed slow just shuts down auto attackers. So Wither, attack speed slow, has been halved. You know what this means? Bye Nasus, you had your time in the sun, and now you're going to quickly drop out of the competitive scene again, because the only reason anyone plays Nasus is for his Wither. And now that the attack speed slow has been cut in half, he will rapidly drop out of the competitive scene once again. Because Wither was stupidly overpowered, and that's the only reason people played Nasus, to get that Wither. And now it's not so strong, so it's not like Nasus clears very well in the jungle. He's quite a weak actual jungler, but Wither was the reason why people played him. Okay, Nunu, you no longer use his passive if... what's this? You no longer use his passive if the target dies before consume resolves. Okay, not that big a deal. Nunu is getting some pretty sizable changes on the PvE server, but we'll deal with them in the next patch. Olaf, same thing as Mundo. He can't kill himself with Reckless Swing. Will not reduce health below 1. Okay, very nice. Quinn, so Quinn, widely regarded as the weakest champion in League of Legends, widely seen as a joke champion. She has gotten some buffs in this patch. They definitely make her stronger. That said, Quinn still does not really fit into the League of Legends metagame at all. She's an AD who has a terrible kit for an AD. So Quinn is widely played in top and mid lane. I just don't understand her kit. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit into the game. Anyway, let's look at the changes they add. And it added an ability power ratio to her Blinding Assault. That's her Q. And that's to make it so building items like Trinity Force are better on her. Trinity is a very good item on Quinn now. I would definitely recommend building Trinity on Quinn. Similar to the old Ezreal, Corki, building Trinity Force on them. So that's to make use of Sheen procs and things like that. Heightened Senses, or W, now gets movement speed in addition to the attack speed bonus as the passive. So that's that's actually a lot of movement speed at max rank. That's like a permanent misfortune strut. So Quinn gonna move around the map really quickly, which is her goal, but we'll see. Not sure it still fits in. Vault, a new addition to this skill, her E. Now it briefly stuns the target, a brief interrupt on her E on Vault. So that is a pretty big buff, actually, adding extra functionality to a skill. And then her ultimate, Tag Speed, increased the movement speed bonus. Now scales up to 100% at all ranks instead of 80%. Base movement speed also increased. Instead of 20% at all ranks, now scales up to 40%. Cooldown reduced. It's actually quite low, only 80 seconds now at max rank. And you can now cast Sky Strike. That's where she shifts back into the human form and drops the rain of arrows from the sky. Can activate that very quickly, 1 second instead of 2.5. This is all nice, but it doesn't really change the fact that Quinn is an AD who has an ult that puts her in melee form, something you would pretty much never want to do as an AD. So Quinn, going to be played in top lane and mid lane. She's actually decent in those roles now, but I'm not sure that that's the role Riot really intended for this champion to be played. In all honesty, Quinn needs a complete redesign. Her kit does not fit the game. It is an interesting idea, but it just didn't work. Quinn is, in order for her to be played in a top or mid lane, she is going to have to be overpowered. So if Riot buffs her too much, she'll just be really overpowered, and people will play her in the same way they played Jace, or somebody like Jace in top lane. Like Jace, I think was intended to be like, you could play him as an AD carry, but no one's ever played him in that role. So you'll see Quinn being played as like a split pusher, as I said, in like the Jace or Nidalee role, something like that. And I'm not really sure that that's a good thing for game balance, but whatever, we'll see. Her kit just does not function correctly as an AD carry. She has to be played in a solo lane, and she is much more viable at that role now. Okay, Rumble Flame Spitter, similar thing to the Fiddlesticks bug fix, no longer stops him from auto-attacking after the Flame Spitter's done. Okay, fixed a bug on Keystrike that caused it to be consumed when attacking wards. I don't think that was a bug, I think that that was by design, but whatever, you can call it a bug fix if you want, Riot. Sivir, a big buff to Sivir in this patch. Her passive, Fleet of Foot, now also grants its effect when you hit an enemy champ with Boomerang Blade or Ricochet. This is a sizable buff to Sivir. Her passive gives her extra movement speed when auto-attacking champions. Now she gets the effect if she hits enemy champs with a Q, her Boomerang Blade, or off of a Ricochet bounce. So she will proc her passive much more often, and that's really a big deal for Sivir because her crippling weakness is her auto attack range is so short. I believe it's either 500 or 525, and that is very short range for AD carries. So this will allow her to get her passive much more often, and that allows her to kite, which is what she needs to do. So this is actually really useful for her. You can toss out your Q or your W and get the movement speed bonus, and then you can kite the enemy AD. So that's really useful for her. I don't think we'll see her played that much unless she gets another buff, but this is actually significant for Sivir. Okay, Thresh. Thresh is probably the strongest support. In the previous patch version, was highly prized in competitive play. They have gone ahead and nerfed him a little bit. Basically, what they have done is they've moved the passive from Death Sentence, where he got bonus damage on his auto attacks. They moved that to Flay, his E. So move from his Q to his E. They increased the damage slightly to make up for it on his Q. So I guess that's nice. So they moved the bonus damage to Flay again. And they reduced the damage from Flay to make up for the fact that Death Sentence now has the passive. Now Flay has the passive instead. This doesn't really change that much. Thresh is still a really good support. This is not a sizable nerf, not a sizable enough nerf. You could have just removed the bonus damage entirely, and he still would probably be played. So this is a bit of a modest nerf. People are still going to play Thresh the same way. This will not be enough to drop him from the competitive scene. There will be more Thresh nerfs incoming. Oh, there will be more Thresh nerfs incoming. Just wait. But this is not enough to really change anything. It's too minor. You will still see people playing Thresh because he is so useful in the ability to pull champs and the ability to get people out of bad situations with Lantern, and his ult is really good. He's too good of a champ still. Not going to change anything. Almost lost in everything else in this patch is Udyr. Got a pretty sizable rework too, to his Q, to his Tiger stance. Pretty sizable. The biggest thing is right here. The active damage from Tiger is changed to physical instead of magic. A lot of people don't like that change. I think it's a good change. It never really made sense that Tiger stance dealt magic damage. You'd look at Udyr, and you'd see him, he'd run up with this big tiger mask on his face, and he'd be, punching somebody like this, and you're like, oh, well, it's physical damage. But no, it was actually magic damage. it didn't really make a lot of logical sense. Most people thought it was physical damage, and you'd actually see people itemize all this armor against top lane Udyr, and then they'd be like, why am I dying so fast? It's like, yeah, well, because he's dealing magic damage, not physical damage. So I think that that's a good change just because it makes more sense, basically. In terms of how they did this, let's see. They have changed the active damage. Let's see. Actually, it's very, very similar here in the active damage. Looking at this, I guess what did they do? They gave the scale. The scaling is. Oh, I see what they did. It's now scaling attack damage instead of a flat 1.5. That's to tone down his early game a little bit. That makes sense. Understandable. So yeah, the active damage now scales on the ratio instead of being a flat 1.5. That's good. Udyr, red pot starting Udyr was pretty terrifying in top lane prior to this. However, look at what they did. They dropped the persistent effect attack speed, but what they did do is they doubled the active attack speed. So you no longer get a persistent effect on attack speed, but now when you activate his Q, you can get up to 70% attack speed, and that's pretty freaking terrifying. And there's a new persistent effect. Basic attacks deal 15% of his total attack damage as bonus physical damage on hit. That means his autos hit even harder when you're in Tiger stance. And they scale, and the damage is physical instead of magic. So is this a nerf or a buff? It's really hard for me to say. I don't think that this really hurts him that much. It just mostly changes his itemizing more than anything. They have up here, Udyr now can itemize Black Cleaver and Last Whisper. Well, those are good items, but the real item you want on top lane Udyr, maxing Tiger stance, the real item you want is Blade of the Ruined King. And that item is nasty on top lane Udyr. Blade of the Ruined King synergizes just so perfectly with him. So top lane Udyr, maxing Tiger stance first, Blade of the Ruined King, and then Black Cleaver or Last Whisper, whatever you prefer. That is pretty terrifying. I'm not going to lie. That is a really, really strong champion. So pretty viable in top lane. It has not really shown up in the competitive scene as yet. We've seen jungle Udyr played a lot, not so much top lane. But I'll be interested to see if people play around with this in top lane. I think it's pretty strong. I think that it's not a bad option at all. And a slight nerf to bear stance. Udyr now only dashes. He has a little gap closer now in his bear stance. Only dashes if he stuns a champ. Not if he's already stunned them, he doesn't get that gap closer. Okay, I mean, it's not trivial, but it doesn't affect that much. I guess, like I said, it's a slight nerf to bear stance. This is the real change to Tiger stance. Mostly, as I said, change to itemization. You need physical penetration items, Black Cleaver, Last Whisper, instead of Magic Pen. Okay. Affects people's rune pages probably more than anything else. Get those Armor Pen rune pages instead. Okay, Vayne, Condemn, range accurately matches their attack range. Okay. It sounds like a bug fix. Vi has had so many bug fixes. Fixed a bug that caused Vault Breaker to become uncastable. Can no longer be cast while charging Vault Breaker. Actually, wow, that's actually a bit of a nerf there, that she can't cast her ult while charging Vault Breaker. Not a huge deal, but that is a bit of a nerf. Zac, not nerfed in this patch. Not sure why. Zac is really strong. One of the strongest champs in the game. He needs to be nerfed. I'm not sure why he isn't. Increased transparency while in brush. Okay, nice graphical effect. Zed getting a nerf, but is a pretty minor nerf. Doesn't change that much. This is a nerf to Zed split pushing, is what this is a nerf to. So, they decrease the cooldown on his Living Shadow. So they decrease the cooldown, now from 22 seconds down to 18 and similar scaling at ranks. But hitting minions and monsters no longer reduces the cooldown on it. So this is, overall, it's a nerf, but it's a very minor nerf. Like I said, it only really affects his split pushing. The idea was Zed would go off and split push, and you'd go to gank him, and he'd just Living Shadow away, use his Shadow Clone and jump away, and then he'd auto-attack minions, and like in 5 seconds, his Living Shadow would be off cooldown again. It was pretty stupid. So it's a fix to that, but that's not really the biggest problem with Zed. This doesn't do anything to change the fact that Zed farms like a beast. He still has great escapability. He's still really hard to gank with his Living Shadow. It's like a Katarina Shunpo escape, and only you don't even need a target to jump to. And Zed can still 100-0 pretty much any champ in the game once he snowballs ahead. That's the real problem. He can kill anyone with his ultimate once he gets ahead. I mean, he just assassinates them so fast. So this nerf doesn't really do that much. Zed is still really strong as a champ. He gets played all the time in the competitive scene. He gets banned a lot. This is a stupid nerf because it doesn't really affect that, and that's the real problem, not his ability to split push. Oh, sure, it's irritating, but that's the real problem. So, me and my friends, we cannot for the life of us understand why Akali got nerfed into the ground, whereas Zed was, like, totally untouched. Even though Zed is much, much stronger than Akali, it doesn't make sense. So, I don't get it. Why? Like, I don't really understand why Akali got the nerf bat and Zed was left untouched. Just a bizarre decision. I realize Zed has a really high skill cap, but he just crushes high elo play and competitive play. So I don't know. I guess Zed nerfs are coming eventually, but this doesn't really do that much to change. I mean, people pick him to assassinate one target, and this doesn't stop him from doing that. So it's not really going to change much. All right, still more changes. Stick with me. This is a very big patch. Still more changes. The biggest one here in the item changes: Red Pot nerf, more formally known as Elixir of Fortitude. Cost increased from 250 to 350 gold. So no longer can you start with Red Pot and Ward and a bunch of health potions. This was needed. This item was too strong. In competitive play, you were seeing 2, 3, even 4 Elixirs of Fortitude as starting items. You had supports starting the game with Red Pots, with Elixir of Fortitude. Way too strong. Now, if you want to start with a red pot, you can't start with much in the way of potions. People will still do it, but you won't see it as often as you did before. It will make it harder to do that. What is it? Was like red pot and then like 5 health pots and a ward, something like that. It was pretty stupid. Related to that, now you can only carry 5 health pots at a time. So no more 13 health pot Mordekaiser. No more 9 health pots and 2 ward starts, which was also quite popular. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this change. I see why they did it. It was kind of stupid that people were starting with a gazillion health pots and they would just sustain endlessly. At the same time, the problem here is not the health potions. The problem is there aren't enough good starting items. Riot just cannot figure out starting items. They have been terrible at starting items at the beginning of the game. There's never a choice. There's always one thing that's so overpowered compared to everything else. They're just terrible at figuring out starting items. So in Season 1, people would start with a Doran's Ring or a Doran's Shield or Doran's Blade and a health pot. That was the most common start. So what did Riot do? Well, they nerfed all the Doran's items. So you couldn't start with one and a health pot. Okay, so everybody started with Boots 3 pots in Season 2. Well, they nerfed Boots. Okay, so Season 3 starts. All right, everybody's going to start Crystalline Flask and a ward and some health pots. Oh, well, now we're going to nerf Crystalline Flask. Okay, so now everybody's going to start Elixir of Fortitude and health pots and a ward. Oh, well, now we nerfed Elixir of Fortitude. Oh, okay, so now we're going to start with a bunch of health pots. Oh, well, we nerfed how many you can carry of them too. What the hell are we supposed to buy at the start of the game? It's just stupid. You can't buy anything at the start of the game. It doesn't make any sense. So what people are doing now, this is the new trend, people are starting Rejuve Bead and a bunch of health pots and a ward. Rejuve Bead, 5 health pots and a ward, I think you can start with. Why are people doing this? Well, no matter what champion, you can always make use of a Rejuve Bead, regardless. Every champ can use health regen, and you can always sell it later, even if it doesn't build into an item. So that's a dumb start, but what else are you going to do? You can't start with a longsword, because then you start with a longsword, you can only buy 2 health pots. You start with an amp tome, you can only buy, I think you can only buy 1 health pot. There just aren't enough choices. Like, there's just not enough choices to start items. What they really need are items that are cheaper and build into stuff. And there's only 2 items that do that right now. Fairy Charm and Rejuve Beads. They're the only ones that are cheap and build into stuff. There needs to be a lot more items that do that. Like, why isn't there an item that costs like 200 gold and is an item that builds into attack damage? Or an item that costs like 200 gold and builds into ability power? These items don't exist, so there's not many choices in what to buy. I guess the only other thing you can buy is a cloth armor. You can buy a cloth armor and 5 health pots. But there's very few items that you can buy right now, so Riot's in a terrible place with starting items, and they're addressing the symptoms and not the cause. The cause is that there's not enough items to start the game with, and hopefully they'll do something with that, because Dota is much better at giving people different starting items to buy, and Riot could steal a page from their playbook and do that. All right, other stuff. The rest of the stuff is fairly minor. They made the cooldown boots, Lucidity boots, cheaper, 50 gold cheaper. Okay. Don't really see why that was needed, but okay. Tiamat was made cheaper, actually sizably cheaper. They also reduced the attack damage, though. No, this is one of the least popular items in the game. And then the combined cost changed so that the total cost of Ravenous Hydra was different. I guess they're trying to make Tiamat more of a mid-game item, whereas Hydra is the end-game item. Nobody really builds these, so it's hard to say. They just don't seem to fit with very many champions. I've seen it on like Gangplank and Fiora, but you don't see those champs too much, so they probably need to consider buffing that item so people will build it. I don't know, maybe someone will come out with a build that relies on Hydra and is really strong, but I don't like that item because it has a 10-second cooldown on the active, and I hate having to use an item every 10 seconds to be effective. I just don't like that playstyle. Alright, new map, Howling Abyss. This is the new Aura map, all random, all mid. Restricted to players of level 5 or above. You can re-roll if you get a champ that you really don't want to play and you get more points from playing. Very nice. I personally have no interest in Aram. It doesn't interest me at all. I think it's kind of silly. I enjoy the strategy aspects of League, not the mechanical aspects. I don't really even find team fights to be that interesting. To me, the game's more about the strategy. How do you get ahead? How do you prioritize objectives? How do you move around the map? So for me, Aram is not very interesting, but I know that a lot of players love this. So it's cool that Riot has listened to them, and now it is an official queue. You can actually queue up for all random, all mid now. So that's great. I love that people love that Riot's listening to them and giving them the ability to play more of those games. Interface, updated the ping icons, great, not a big deal. This, though, is awesome. Item shop can be resized. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have already done this in-game. You can now resize the item shop to make it bigger, and if you have a big screen resolution, you can see more items. So thank goodness. I hated the fact that the item screen was like crammed into this tiny little block on the screen, and you'd have to scroll down to see the items. I hated that. So it is now much easier to use the item shop. Thank you. Alright, they fixed this bug. This was a really irritating bug. Anytime you played a ranked game, you would not see your league point gains. It would just say league info processing. You'd never see that. That was really irritating. Thank you for fixing that. Champion headers designed for each specific league have been added to the leagues tab. I'm not entirely sure what this means. I'll have to look back at that. They've redone the allocation of LP, more predictable LP gains. Riot's been tweaking that a bit. From my experience, it definitely needed more work. Dodging a match in a promotion series counts as a loss. Makes sense. I assume that was already the case before that. Okay, Baron and Dragon, now immune to damage-reducing effects, so no more using Sona Power Core W to reduce the damage from Baron. A little bit sad that's a buff to the damage of Baron and Dragon, so you have to be a little bit more careful when you try to kill them. This, thank you, thank you, thank you. Baron, Dragon, Vile Wall kill messages, all bolded in chat. Thank you 100 times over, thank you. As a support player, this makes my life so much easier trying to find those kill messages in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Similar thing for the altars on Twisted Treeline. Okay, I don't play Twisted Treeline, but similar idea. I'm sure it's very useful for serious competitive play there. Items with charges now displayed in the inventory rather than on this as a buff. I'm not actually a huge fan. I think it's easier to see them when they're displayed as a buff, but I suppose I can get used to it. I just think it's harder to see that number down in the corner than in sort of the middle of the screen. No longer see reconnect messages from the enemy team. A lot of people had asked for that. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but if someone disconnects, you will now no longer see. You no longer get a message for disconnecting or reconnecting, so you have no idea if someone disconnects on the enemy team. A lot of people had asked for that. Trundle is now in the basic tutorial. This is more of a lore thing than anything else. The tutorial is now played on the Howling Abyss. It's the Icy map, so they picked an Icy champ for that. So Trundle in there, probably for lore reasons. Spell shields only block one shield, even if multiple spells hit the target in rapid succession. Not a huge change. That was kind of a bug. Spell shield was not intended to block multiple spells, but champs like Sivir and Nocturne and Morgana are probably not big fans of that. Blind random as a new pick type. Same as all random, but you can't see what the other team got in random. Interesting. Interesting. Maybe play around with this a little bit. I have to do a game night where we do all random in every game at some point. That would kind of be fun. And apparently they said that there was a performance increase for certain types of laptop, but then apparently that was a mistake. Okay. All right. Anyway, though, this is a gigantic patch, as you can see how long this video is, but a lot in here, and you have to go through it. Lissandra, new champ, and Sejuani and Trundle are, I mean, they're not new champs because their kits are similar to their old kits, but I mean, they were redesigned, and I mean, there's pretty sizable changes to other champs too, like Karma, big change here. Quinn is this is almost a rework of Quinn because they added sizable stuff to her kit, and then Udyr. Big rework to him too. So a lot going on in this patch. Overall, seems pretty good for the most part. Can't really complain about too much. And it'll be nice to see some of these champs. And people really seem to like the just the aesthetics of the new patch. All the icy stuff, the lore that they came out with. They did a video on Freljord lore, and they have the new summoner icons. You can see one there underneath here on this video. So it's a cool patch. And yes, not intending the terrible pun there with all of the icy stuff, but it's a good patch. There's a lot in here, And I hope they do more of these kind of theme patches in the future. I would actually prefer them to do less patches, fewer patches, but more like thematically oriented ones. I think that would be really fun. I would vastly prefer that to the old patch every 2 weeks with like a gazillion balance changes. I'd like to have fewer patches that are like this. I would enjoy it if we saw that. But anyway, this video is too long already. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. And you should see some more videos up on this channel over the weekend. Until then, later. Have a good one, guys.